Good morning. It is 8:30. Community Voice brought to us here on a daily basis by Tanner Health System. Adam Uglum here in the newsroom, your morning news host, Monday through Friday, and usually on Tuesday and Thursday, I get the opportunity, and we get the opportunity to converse about things that are important to us. Well, the last time we were on the air, we had Mikey Smith, gentleman from the Libertarian County affiliate, student at University of West Georgia, also heads the Libertarian group there. We talked about bureaucracy. And we're continuing a series. Starting on Thursday, we'll have two special guests. We'll have Mikey Smith returning, and a good friend of his, new friend of mine, Jared Yamamoto. We'll be talking about bureaucracy more on Thursday. But I need to preface it today. Lots to cover, so let's get started. Going to be a little all over the place, it's going to sound like, but trust me, there is a point. There's all this talk about the president and his next 4 years, and that is if he is granted those 4 years. You know what? I'm really just about ready to hang up my right-wing, freedom-loving, logic-oriented, analytical, factual hat on the post. The hat is going to go there. It gets harder and harder every day to be on the right. Why? Because government isn't the answer to everything. Therefore, I allege it makes it very easy to be on the left. Because if you are on the left, here is problem X, and the solution, your answer, the government. Problem Y, your solution, the government. Very simple. You notice a pattern here? When you ask about conservative policies, I hate using that word, but we'll use it because that's how everyone understands it. When you talk about right-wing policies, freedom-oriented policies, conservative policies for solving the world's problem, you have to bring out charts, graphs, economic data, and ancient political philosophy regarding natural law. You have to bring out your Federalist Papers and John Locke's second treatise on government to make your argument. Because you can't just say, oh, well, the government should do it, which is the easy answer that the left are provided with. We on the right, we have to make logical, factual, analytical arguments. All to be told that you're a draconian simpleton who can't get out of old world thinking. And what's funny is that this old world thinking is what made this country the greatest on the planet. George Washington led a ragtag, impoverished, demoralized, and bankrupt army against the most powerful military force the world had ever seen in an attempt to incubate this idea of the American dream. Thousands died fighting to make this country independent of divine oppression, high taxes, no representation in the British Parliament, etc. Just think on that for just a moment. What in the world was the driving force of this group of a few thousand everyday folks in Washington's army with barely any food, barely any clothing, many of whom had no shoes for extended periods of time, and it was easily the most underfunded army there was. The country was very divided in the Revolutionary War. Nobody wanted to fund the military. What was the big deal? Why fight? And the answer is simple. It's freedom, but it's important. We have to talk about what freedom is, and why is it becoming so difficult to fight the battle for freedom? And I say it's hard, but I don't think that fighting the intellectual battle for freedom is so much hard as it is complicated. Thanks to the tremendous bubble that we've built for ourselves in this country, the American people don't have a clue as to what real poverty is, or real freedom for that matter. No one cares about facts, economics, or even politics for that matter. As long as I can work my 9 to 5 and drink beer and watch football every evening and keep a roof over my family's collective head, that's all that most people care about. For some people, it's watching American Idol, Glee, playing golf, watching football or baseball, or whatever it is. We've gotten so disconnected from the political process, the founding documents, history. We have allowed over these last 100 years for the government and the underground socialist, progressive, Marxist, whatever you want to call it, that movement to creep into our lives and our liberties. Complacency will, can, and maybe even has destroyed this country. Here's a quote from the esteemed Thomas Jefferson. I predict future happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them. That's Thomas Jefferson. Do you even know who he is? Well, of course, we all know of him. Well, what can you tell me about him? He authored the Declaration of Independence. He was the third president of the United States and founder of the University of Virginia. He was the political nemesis of Alexander Hamilton, the man who had been described as one who more than any other designed the government of the United States. The two were great friends, but did you know that they disagreed very much on the concepts upon which the country was founded? Did you know that the founders even disagreed on anything? They did, a lot. Alexander Hamilton was the son of a well-to-do Caribbean trader, a good writer at a young age. His community collected money to send him to the U.S. It wasn't the U.S. at the time, for education at what is now Princeton. He fought in the Revolutionary War and was responsible for several successes thanks to his determination to history and tactics. He learned those, his determination to learn history and tactics. He taught himself history and battle tactics on his own, quickly earning him the rank of lieutenant and then captain. You now know more about a couple of the founding fathers than 99 of 100 people walking around on the streets. They were truly inspiring men with inspiring tales, men that we should all know much, much more about and learn much from. Really, it's time we woke up. It's time that we read John Locke. It's time that we read Adam Smith. It's time that we appreciate Alexander Hamilton, read John Jay, read James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, Aristotle, and others. Most people I've ever asked or spoken with about Aristotle, most of them tell me he was an astronomer. And he's not. The guy was an anomaly for his time. He was born 384 years before Jesus Christ. And the man was already talking about individual liberties, the natural rights of individuals, and republics, this idea of republicanism. Over 2 millennia ago, this guy was thinking about this. And if you haven't read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, you really should. It's a pleasant read and controversial in a sense. We're kind of lucky we have it. It's really an unusual tale as to how we actually have his autobiography. And in it, Benjamin Franklin basically tells you his life story and how awesome he is. But he doesn't tell you that to be arrogant. He tells you that as proof that if he can do it, anyone can. It's all his autobiography is all about the American dream. It comes across as being pretentious, but it's about being free, learning, understanding liberty, understanding individual freedom. And it's time, ladies and gentlemen, that we woke up. It's time the silent majority stood up and demanded our freedom. Thomas Jefferson once said periodic revolution, at least once every 20 years, was a medicine necessary for the sound health of government. Now, Hamilton and Jefferson very much disagreed on this principle, on this idea that we should have a revolution every 20 years. But principally, they agreed that every 20 years, the people need to wake up and make sure their individual liberties are not being taken advantage of or forsaken on the premise of taking care of them, or the pretense, as Jefferson put it. Hamilton meant a revolution internally by the ballot box, and Jefferson sort of meant literally writing a new constitution. Enslaving yourself under the guise of your own protection is beyond tragic, and no one can take better care of you than yourself, and you know it. Deep down inside, you know that no entity, no person will ever care for you as you care for yourself. And that's something that's very core to individual liberty. Ayn Rand says that the individual is the smallest minority. You cannot believe in minority rights without believing in individual rights first and foremost. No one can take care of you than yourself. No one can better take care of you than yourself. And you know it. We all know it. No one can do a better job at watching out for us than us. And it's something we all need to wake up and realize. We'll take our first break and be right back. And we'll get into talking about today's topic and how our freedoms are being encroached upon. And that's what this series that I want to do and talk about, these bureaucracies, many of which most of us don't even know exist. There's so many of them. And what they do. I mean, most people don't know the Department of Agriculture is responsible for some welfare policies. We'll be back after the break. You're listening to the voice of Adam Uglum here, your news host in the morning and occasional political analyst. It's now 8:40. Tanner Health System provides us with the opportunity to have this program. It's 678-601-8255, the number here on the program. if you'd like to call in, but we'll continue talking about today's topic. We'll get into the recent rhetoric on the national airwaves.
Because of you, folks who find the experience of a traditional MRI too confining have a comfortable solution. Open MRI at Tanner Health System. Tanner Medical Center Carrollton now offers open MRI services with an almost 360-degree opening. Children, adults, and anyone who feels claustrophobic in a traditional MRI system will find Tanner's new high-field open MRI an inviting alternative. Open MRI joins Tanner's traditional MRI services, keeping high-caliber diagnostic imaging convenient and close to home. For more information on open MRI services at Tanner, speak with your physician. To learn more, visit tanner.org or call 770-214-CARE.
Because of you, we're here.
Tanner Health System.
Alrighty, welcome back. It is 8:41. Lots of stuff to get through, so I'm just going to keep moving here. Our president, the esteemed President Barack Obama, is proposing I'll slow down, $1.5 trillion with a T in tax hikes on the American people to pay for his political campaign. None of this garbage this demagogue is filling the airwaves with is ever going to pass the Congress, and he knows this. He's doing this for one reason, so that he can say exactly this come campaign season next year. And I'm just going to make this up. This is what it's going to sound like. Look at those obstructionist Republicans. All I'm trying to do is fix the economy, close these budget deficits, make those millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share. And they just want to stop progress for political reasons. The president's going to say something exactly along those lines. And folks, the opposite couldn't be more than true. The Obama administration's new tax plan is supposed to be a very significant tax hike on the rich, is how he's campaigning this. But even doubling the tax burden on millionaires, which is not what the president's proposing, just say you did. Even if you did double the tax burden on millionaires, you would only raise about $19 billion per year, a drop in the bucket compared to our multi-trillion-dollar deficit. Just a quick blurb, $48 billion in Medicare was wasted last year. That's just Parts A and Part B. And doubling the millionaire's tax burden would only raise about $20 billion a year, in a best-case scenario. The administration's class warfare rhetoric is really just a cover for a tax hike that's going to hit small businesses and the people who actually pay taxes. The bottom line is there aren't enough millionaires, and we all need to realize that there aren't enough of them to do what this president wants to. And here's an article from the Washington Post. As President Obama and congressional Republicans argue over how to rewrite the U.S. tax code, the debate has revolved around loopholes for corporate jets and ending carve-outs for well-heeled special interests. But if the goal is debt reduction, that's not where the money is. Broad tax breaks granted to millions of families at all income levels dwarf the corporate giveaways. Over the past 2 years, largely because of these popular benefits in the federal income tax code, the government has reached a rare milestone in tax collection. Get this. The government has given away nearly as much as it takes in. The number of tax breaks has nearly doubled since the last major tax overhaul 25 years ago during the Reagan administration, with lawmakers adding new benefits for children, college tuition, retirement savings, and investment. At the same time, some long-standing breaks have exploded in value, such as the deduction for mortgage interest and the tax-free treatment of health insurance premiums paid by employers. All told, federal taxpayers last year received $1.08 trillion in credits, so just above $1 trillion in credits, deductions, and other perks, while only paying $1.09 trillion in income taxes, according to government estimates. Only about 8% of this $1.08 trillion in benefits went to corporations. The write-off for corporate jets equals 0.03% of that total. Again, the corporate jet tax, the benefit, 0.03% of the benefits in tax law. The bulk 92% went to private households, primarily upper middle class families who own homes and have children that Obama has vowed to protect from new taxes. So what's that you say about honesty in the tax debate? Who's that you say is not paying his fair share of taxes? Who is it that you say doesn't fund the bulk of federal government? And to get back to the principal argument here is that individual liberty is key. Property is key. We talk about money a lot and taxes a lot. And what does that have to do with freedom, you may ask? Well, what is money? Money is simply a convenient, transferable form of your individuality. Your individual labor produced that money. Not the collective work of everyone, but your share of the work, perhaps. Money is property. And that's something that we're getting away from. Money represents your personal property. It is your intellectual capital, your intellectual labor, your physical labor. Tax on income is a tax on your personal property, which is why the 16th Amendment had to be passed under Woodrow Wilson to make income taxes legal, because the founders did not want income taxes. The government got along for 120 years without taxing income. No capitation or other direct tax shall be laid, is what the Constitution said until the 16th Amendment. And now it says, unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. We can thank Woodrow Wilson for the income tax, the constitutional income tax. We had it a couple of times before in times of emergencies, but it was quickly ruled unconstitutional. The real problem here is that the wealthy already pay more than their fair share of taxes after all. Now, fair is somewhat subject to opinion, but let me run this by you. Scott Hodge of the Tax Policy Center blog wrote today about newly released IRS statistics that show the top 1% of taxpayers paid 40.4% of the total income taxes collected by the federal government. This is the highest percentage in modern history. By contrast, the top 1% paid 24.8% of the income tax burden at the end of the Reagan administration, the year following the '86 Tax Reform Act. Remarkably, bolded here for emphasis in this report, the share of the tax burden borne by the top 1% now exceeds the share paid by the bottom 95% of taxpayers combined. In 2007, the bottom 95% paid almost 40% of the income tax burden. This is down from the 58% of total income tax they paid 20 years ago. 50% less. To put this in perspective, the top 1% is comprised of just 1.4 million taxpayers, 1.4 million people. And they pay a larger share of the income tax burden now than the bottom 134 million taxpayers combined. Again, for emphasis, 1.4 million people in this country pay more taxes than the other 134 million people who file for tax returns. How dare those greedy, rich people oppose tax increases? Much less the poor guy sitting here in the chair. The average guy. I don't favor tax increases on anyone. I think that you should get the most of your money possible. Scott Hodge, the gentleman who wrote this report, here's his final observation. Some in Washington say the tax system is still not progressive enough. However, the recent IRS data bolsters the findings of an OECD study that was released last year, showing that among modern economies, that the U.S., not France or Sweden, has the most progressive income tax among modern nations. The U.S. relies more heavily on the top 10% of taxpayers than does any other nation, and our poor people have the lowest tax burden of people in the world. We have the most progressive tax system there is, period. These statistics prove that Democrat proposals to further tax the rich are not grounded in the principles of good public policy or simple notions of fairness, but rather they are designed to pit one class of Americans against another to gain political advantage. Democrats' most recent efforts to convince the non-rich majority that the rich minority is the source of all their woes is cynical, manipulative, and unoriginal. But most of all, it's just bad for the country. There exists also in the human heart a depraved taste for equality which impels the weak to attempt to lower the powerful to their own level, and reduces men to prefer equality in slavery to inequality with freedom. That's a quote from Alexis de Tocqueville. He wrote Democracy in America. It's a very good book. You should read it. One more time. There exists also in the human heart a depraved taste for equality, which impels the weak to attempt to lower the powerful to their own level and reduces men to prefer equality in slavery as opposed to inequality with freedom. We'll be back after the break. More on this. You really should read Alexis de Tocqueville. My political science professor said if we buy the book and read it, we will be saved and go to heaven. And I presume the same goes for you too. Back after the break.
Because of you, folks who find the experience of a traditional MRI too confining have a comfortable solution. Open MRI at Tanner Health System. Tanner Medical Center Carrollton now offers open MRI services with an almost 360-degree opening. Children, adults, and anyone who feels claustrophobic in a traditional MRI system will find Tanner's new high-field open MRI an inviting alternative. Open MRI joins Tanner's traditional MRI services, keeping high-caliber diagnostic imaging convenient and close to home. For more information on open MRI services at Tanner, speak with your physician. To learn more, visit tanner.org or call 770-214-CARE.
Because of you, we're here.
Tanner Health System.
Good morning. We are back with about 8 minutes left in the program. The number here, 678-601-8255. If you'd like to be part of the program, the number 678-601-TALK. If you've got a question or comment, be happy to take your phone call. But getting back to the root of everything, I've pretty much covered what I want to talk about today. And here we get to how easy it is to be a leftist, how easy it is to be a statist, how easy it is to be a socialist. Have you ever watched MSNBC or CNN, or if you can find one, a left-wing talk show on the radio? They're very hard to find. Trust me, I've tried to find them, and they're few and far between. But when you hear them talk, it's very seldom about facts, economic data. When you argue from the right, you almost have to. You have to pull out this IRS report. You have to pull out the Federalist Papers. You have to pull out John Locke's second treatise on government, as I mentioned earlier. It seems like the argument is awfully one-sided when it comes to intellect. I mean, have you ever heard Maxine Waters speak? Or Reverend Al Sharpton, for that matter? You know, and I was talking with my good new friend Mikey Smith yesterday, and we were eating pizza and talking politics, as us politically minded folks do. And I said, you know, I've asked this question probably a dozen times to friends of mine or acquaintances or people I've gotten in arguments with on the left, on the internet, or wherever. And I say, you know what, you talk about these corporations and businesses paying their share or paying more in taxes, that they shouldn't be allowed to make profits, or whatever the case is that you make. The one question they've never been able to answer is, where does all the money come from that these businesses pay these taxes with? You say you want them to pay these taxes, but the fundamental problem is they get it from you and me and your sister and your cousin and your mom and dad. When we buy their products and we buy those things that we that we need, when we buy groceries at the grocery store, those taxes come out of our pockets. Ultimately, they're writing the check. That might be true. The business may be writing the check to the government on the taxes, but that money originated from my work, your work, our paycheck, or if you're dependent on the government, everyone else's paycheck. But the president tries to make it sound as if there are millionaires all over America who aren't paying taxes at all, or that if they are, they're paying taxes at lower rates than their secretaries. And I'm not sure how the president is allowed to get away with making the argument that capital gains taxes, which aren't even remotely income taxes, amount for what millionaires pay in taxes. That millionaires who just invest in the stock market, that's all they earn, blah, blah, blah. Where does the money come from? That's the critical question here. Money comes from work and labor and investment. It comes from intellectual capital, physical labor, production. Capital gains is a double tax. Wherever the money came from, it was worked for at some point, and they paid income taxes on it. Now, they may have invested it in the economy and ultimately paid capital gains tax on it, but why do you pay taxes on it earned again? I earn $100 this week, and I decide that I'm going to invest it in a stock that's tanked. I'm going to buy a bunch of shares of a 50-cent stock on the stock market. Well, it balloons, and I make a few $1,000s, and I decide to sell it at the end of the year. Well, I did just fine. Well, the government wants 15% of that. And I say, well, hold on a second. I paid income tax and FICA taxes on the $100 when I earned it. Why am I paying taxes on that money again just because it grew? It doesn't make any sense. Why do we tax capital gains at all? If we're in an economy where we want to encourage investment and encourage the growth of business, why do we discourage the growth of investment? It seems very contradictory, and the capital gains tax has historically never proven to raise revenue when the rates are increased. It is the only tax that is simple and flat, and when you raise the tax, it doesn't bring in revenue. Clinton raised it, it didn't bring in revenue. He later lowered it and doubled the revenue, and President Bush held on to that. And the president that we have now, President Barack Obama, said that he was going to raise it just for purposes of fairness. This guy is all about fairness. The guy wouldn't know fairness if it hit him with a stick. But all you have to do is look at the numbers, look at the data. Our own government provides us with the data to tell our government employees, our government representatives, that they're wrong. But people who sit around all day and work and come home and then sit around all afternoon drinking beer and watching American Idol, who don't give a flip about how the world works or what the economy's like, all they know is, well, I make $35,000 a year, and everybody that makes more than me should pay more in taxes than I do. They do. And they have been for a long time. Wake up. It gets very frustrating because it's so easy to argue, well, there's a problem. Well, the government should fix it. Very easy argument to make, Captain Leftist. It gets so old fighting the same battle over and over again. You can lay out facts, economic data, IRS reports, philosophical evidence, philosophical progression over thousands of years on the state of man and nature, economic law, and your argument doesn't mean anything to these people because it's not fair. Or, well, the principle is wrong. Poor people shouldn't have to pay taxes. Why should I have to work? I should just get a check from the government. It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand. Is it a futile argument? Why can't the argument be made and the person who's disagreeing with you say, well, wait a minute, your facts are right. But you see, that's not what's going on here. That's the fundamental difference. The problem is that there is an agenda being promoted by the left. When you tax something, you get less of it. When you subsidize something, you get more of it. The Democrats want to tax rich people so there are less wealthy people and more poor people because they want to subsidize poverty by basing the government on being funded by the top income earners. They are increasing their base by increasing taxes on the rich. We are all ultimately self-interested, and that's not a bad thing. Something I can talk about at a later date because I'm out of time here. But we are all self-interested. Don't blame the people, blame the system. The people need to fix the system.